Hello everyone, my name is Quinn Knight and welcome back to How to Not Suck at Star Wars Battlefront II. Today we'll be looking at Captain Phasma, everyone's favorite trash compactor resident and the newest addition to the villain side of things in Battlefront 2. We'll start off by going over the very basics that you'll need to effectively use Phasma on the battlefield, and then we'll be moving on to strategy so you can use Chrome Dome to dominate the enemy team. Later this week I'll be covering Finn, but he is much easier to use and just a much better hero overall, so I decided to help you guys out with Phasma first. Also, just a quick question for you guys, would you guys want me to finish up the other heroes I haven't completed? I know I still haven't covered Iden, Yoda, Han, or Boba Fett. If you would like me to finish up this series with those heroes, let me know by dropping a like on this video. If enough people want me to finish up the old heroes, I'd be more than happy to go back and get those done for you. So to start off, let's cover Phasma's basic health and movement capabilities. Phasma starts off with 700 HP, with her survivor ability temporarily buffing her to 900 health without any upgrades. We'll discuss her abilities a little bit later, but her 700 HP is pretty middle of the road for a dark side hero. I never feel like I'm low on health when it comes to Phasma, and she really does feel like a bit of a bullet sponge when you're effectively using survivor to shield yourself. When it comes to her movement speed, she is definitely on the slow side of things when it comes to villains, and is completely unable to keep up with Kylo, Darth Maul, Boba Fett, or even Boss. In heroes versus villains, this can be a bit of a problem, as you'll find it very difficult to make a quick escape when you find yourself in a 4v1 situation, as most of the light side heroes can easily outpace you and take you out quickly. She is not equipped with any special moves, instead only having the most basic jump and roll, which can be pretty effective when avoiding lightsaber users, but she can only roll twice before entering a short cooldown, so managing your dodge rolls can be very important when taking on a lightsaber user. Alright, let's cover Phasma's F11D blaster rifle. Now, if you're watching this video months after it's been posted, there's a pretty solid chance her blaster has been buffed, but as it currently stands, her blaster is by far the weakest of the hero weapons, and has a much longer time to kill than most of the regular infantry weapons. If you were to line up Phasma's F11D against Han's DL44, Leia's Defender Pistol, Lando's X8 Sniper, Iden's TL50, or even Chewie's Bowcaster, she is going to lose every single time if the two players facing each other are equally skilled. The damage is quite low, the fire rate is mediocre at best, and this blaster has the worst spread of any weapon I can think of in the entire game. But I'm not here to rant on just how god-awful her blaster is, I'm here to teach you how to use it effectively. The first thing I need to mention is Phasma's blaster has a dual zoom feature, and sometimes I feel like I'm the only one that even knows about this, because I've seen multiple Phasma guides that straight up fail to mention her dual zoom scope. This scope allows you to pick off enemies from much further away and can turn Phasma's rifle from a mid-range weapon to somewhat effective at long range. Now, her rifle has close to no recoil from the sight when you're aiming down the sight. I mean, it won't kick up, but its biggest drawback is the crazy spread of the blaster bolts, and I think this is why most people absolutely hate her rifle. Her F11D has a very unique feature that is admittedly really annoying when you first use it. The spread of her blaster decreases the longer you fire it, so the longer you hold down the trigger, the more accurate it gets. When you begin firing, the spread is probably worse than even the CR2, which is explicitly a close range weapon, but by the time you've held down the trigger for a half second, the blaster becomes a laser that has the potential to pick people off somewhat quickly. This means you'll have to use her blaster very strategically, and burst firing this weapon in mid to long range gunfights can make this weapon feel extremely inaccurate, but once you get a feel for keeping the trigger held down, this gun does become decently effective. The biggest issue is this weapon overheats really quickly, so by the time the accuracy is where it needs to be to score a quick kill, this weapon will be near overheating and you'll be forced to start all over again. The best thing I can say about her blaster is, well, it is at the very least usable at all ranges. It can do okay up close if you're accurate, and at medium to long ranges, it is somewhat easy to pick players off who just aren't paying attention. I've found with heavies or even assault players that her blaster will often overheat before you've even finished off one at medium range due to the spread of the weapon. Now that we've covered Phasma's health, movement, and primary fire, let's move on to her abilities and the crux of everyone's complaints with this character. The community is generally in agreement that Phasma is one of the worst heroes in Battlefront 2, and one of her abilities is definitely a big part of that. Personally, I don't know if I would consider the absolute worst, but when you look at the villain lineup, I mean Maul, Vader, Palpatine, Boba Fett, and honestly even Iden, she's definitely on the weaker side of things. She does have her uses, but she is a very situational hero. Her three abilities are her Staff Strikes, First Order Sentry Droid, and Survivor. We'll start off by covering Survivor, the most useful and basic of her three abilities. Survivor is very simple. It gives Phasma a temporary health boost, raising her health pool by 200 HP without any star card upgrades. This does not give allies any health whatsoever like Yoda's presence or Finn's big deal, and only buffs herself, and Survivor is admittedly pretty amazing at times, and I always love using this right before entering a gunfight or a room full of enemies, as this allows Phasma to lose 200 health before actually cutting into her base health pool, and effectively activating Survivor into gunfights can allow Phasma to consistently absorb devastating amounts of damage without actually losing her base health pool. It's not insanely useful, it's not as good as Yoda's presence or Finn's big deal, but it is pretty nice from time to time due to her already somewhat high health. There isn't too much to say about this ability as it's extremely simple to use. Definitely don't wait to activate this until you're in the middle of a gunfight, as the ability does have a somewhat lengthy animation and activation time that leaves you completely unable to fire your weapon at all. Next up, we have her Staff Strikes. Phasma can do an extremely slow strike with her staff and can chain 3 together with the final strike doing increased damage. DICE has already come out and said they're working on changing the way these work, but as they currently stand, using her Staff Strike is pretty much a death wish. The strikes have no range whatsoever, and the animation cannot be cancelled and leaves you completely defenseless for about 3 to 4 seconds. Even if you do land a strike, it won't even one-hit kill heavy troopers, and the risk is just not worth it at all. By the time the animation is complete, you could have dealt way more damage with your crappy blaster and not leave yourself completely defenseless. The only time it is even somewhat viable to use is when a player is completely frozen or stunned, and even then, you'd be better off just killing them quickly with your blaster. Until this ability is patched or just reworked altogether, avoid the Staff Strikes like the plague. Her third and final ability is her First Order Sentry Droid, and this droid can be amazing. You set it down wherever you see fit, and it will shoot and stun anyone who comes within its radius. The droid can be very powerful at locking down a choke point, as anyone stunned, even some of the lower health heroes, can be picked off by the time they're free from the stun. The droid is very tough for the enemy team to destroy, as it has an absurd amount of HP that allows for the sentry to stick around for quite some time. Now, while the droid is great in concept, in practice, it's rarely useful, and that is entirely due to the way people play this game. I had one game of HVV where my teammates were actually willing to stick together. We locked down an area of the map with my sentry droid, and anyone who came near was completely defenseless. They'd get shocked, we'd pick them off. It was really easy, and if you have a squad to play with you that will strategize, Phasma's droid is downright amazing, one of the best abilities in the entire game. Unfortunately, in my experience, most games aren't going to go that way at all. If you've ever played HVV, you'll know that 9 games out of 10 when you're on the villain side, the 3 villains that are always picked right off the bat are Maul, Vader, and Kylo Ren, and your teammates have no interest whatsoever in strategizing or locking down an area. They just want to rush forward and attempt to get as many kills as possible, probably getting themselves killed and leaving you all by yourself, just shaking your head at the other team's actual cooperation with each other. And this makes the droid much less useful, as it's really meant for locking down objectives or just making a little bit of a choke point. And on Galactic Assault maps with small objectives like maybe Yavin 4's second objective, you don't always need to rely on your teammates for the droid to be useful, but let's be real here, 90% of the time no one has any interest in the objective at all, which just adds to how situational her droid is. It can be somewhat effective just dropping the droid at your feet as someone's chasing you behind you and hoping that the players are just stupid enough to run through it, but unlike boss proximity mines, the enemy can see her droid and its full radius. When the situation comes around where Phasma's droid is an asset, it is a great one, but once again, it is very situational. Okay, now that we've covered Phasma's very basics, let's just go over her star cards. Now, we're going to do this somewhat differently than before, and we're going to touch on all of her star cards this time around. Phasma has a total of 9 star cards, and I'll start out by saying that 3 of these should be totally disregarded. Do not bother with any of her staff upgrades. They are all completely worthless. Even if her staff was way more effective, I still wouldn't bother with any of these, as they will rarely benefit you, and when they do, it will be a very minimal benefit. Okay, the first loadout I would recommend to you, and this is her best star card setup in my opinion, would be the cards Easy Shots, Not Hard Enough, and Safety First. Easy Shots is by far and away her best card for Galactic Assault. For each enemy you kill with her blaster, the heat will be reduced, and once epic, it will reduce the heat by 60%. This will allow you to kill more enemies without losing the accuracy bonus, and does make her blaster significantly better. In HVV, this card can still be useful, but definitely not to the same degree, as you won't be getting as many kills. Next up, we have Not Hard Enough, and this card is equally useful in both Galactic Assault and HVV. This one gives her a small damage reduction while her survivor ability is active at first, and once you get it to epic, it goes all the way up to 50%, which will effectively double your bonus health from survivor, as you'll be taking way less damage, which, well, it's pretty understandable and doesn't need to be explained why this is so great. Safety First is also fantastic, and this card simply increases the total amount of health that Phasma receives from survivor, and once you combine this with Not Hard Enough, this greatly increases her ability to tank through massive damage with her survivor ability active. This is by far her best loadout if you play both Galactic Assault and HVV equally, and really can increase Phasma's usefulness overall. She does have 3 additional cards that improve her First Order Sentry Droid, and if you are mostly a HVV player, I would recommend swapping out Easy Shots for the more the better. Easy Shots rarely is useful in HVV, and increasing the quickness of the shock from her droid can be a lifesaver from time to time. Now that we've covered her basics, abilities, and her star cards, I'm gonna wrap this episode up by just being completely honest. We've covered most of the heroes in this game, and so far I found a niche, or at least a solid reason to use each and every one of them, and with Phasma I just don't see it because it's not there. Her blaster is outclassed by pretty much every other weapon in the game, her survivor ability is just a much weaker version of Yoda's presence and Finn's big deal, her staff is utterly useless, and her First Order droid is nice, but quite honestly, it's much easier to lock down objectives with Palpatine, Bosk, or even Iden. She is usable. I've went on a handful of 30+ kill streaks with her, and at the end of the day, she just doesn't have anything to offer that other villains already can't do much more effectively. And quite honestly, I'm going to complete her challenges and probably never touch her again. She's one of the only heroes I feel that way about. I mean, all of them I enjoy using from time to time and can do so well with. And Phasma's no exception to doing well with, because at the end of the day, it's the player, not the character. But there are just other characters that are just so much better and so less situational, and I just don't enjoy using her. Every time I use her, I just wish I was using pretty much any other villain. Well guys, that is going to wrap it up for today's video. If you did enjoy it, definitely drop me a thumbs up, as that really does help me out. And it's December 23rd, so enjoy your Christmas. If you don't celebrate Christmas, well, have a happy December 25th. If you made it to this part of the video, comment Chrome Dome in the comment section down below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. I'm solo, I'm Han Solo, I'm Han Solo, I'm Han Solo.